About a year ago, in my What Did We Do video, I explained how on top of all the obvious catastrophic costs of the lockdown policies, the greatest cost of all may have been overlooked. Here is a reminder of what I had to say at the time.
Let me explain by first giving you some bad news. You are going to die. I'm sorry if you didn't realise that, but it's true. One day, you're going to die. I'm going to die. This is my remaining timeline. On the 23rd of March 2020, I was 42 years old. I'm a pretty fit person, so I've decided I'm going to live until I'm 100, which means I had 58 years left at this point. My plan is, and always has been, to spend the few years I have left cramming in as much as possible, enjoying myself as much as I can, and bringing happiness into other people's lives whilst I'm here. Soon, it will be the 23rd of March 2021, at which point I'll have 57 years left. Now, whether I'm right or wrong with my optimistic assessment that I'll live until I'm 100, I have lost 1 year of my life. You have lost 1 year of your life too. Let's revisit what it means to kill. To kill is to forcibly remove years from a person's life. If we assume that all lives are equally important, and that any individual person's future years are equally important, it doesn't matter which years you remove, it's still killing. Now, it's nowhere near as simple as that, because we've all lived through the last year. So the question is then, how has the last year been for you? 80% enjoyment, perhaps? To help you answer that question, imagine you could go back a year in time and be offered a deal by the devil, whereby instead of experiencing the year of lockdowns as you just have, you could instead experience 10 months in a normal world of no lockdowns, and then click your fingers and 2 months just goes. You just age by 2 months in an instant. Would you take such a deal? Then work out what your equivalent point is. So for example, if you would just as happily have had 9 months normal, plus 3 months lost in an instant, as have lived the last year as we did, this would give you a 75% enjoyment factor. Another way of saying this would be that 25% of your last year has been killed. My enjoyment factor is very low, maybe as low as 50%. For some people, the last year has been absolutely horrendous, possibly to the point they would rather have had all 12 months deleted, hence a negative enjoyment factor. At the other end, I have one friend whose own life he believes has actually been better during lockdown, and hence an enjoyment factor greater than 100%. Chatting to many people about this question, the average seems to be about 80%. Now let's just ignore all the evidence I've presented so far and assume that lockdown does actually work and it saves the 500,000 lives that Imperial College's model predicted would die on top of the 100,000 COVID deaths that we've had anyway. Let's make a generous assumption that each of these lives had about 5 years saved. The average age of people dying of COVID is higher than the average age of people dying normally, so 5 years seems pretty reasonable. This would mean that we've saved 2.5 million people years. If we take the 67 million people in the UK who didn't need saving and an 80% average enjoyment factor for the last year, this means each of these people has been killed by 20% of 1 year, which equates to 13.4 million people years killed, more than 5 times the number of people years that we've saved, even if lockdown works. Even with an average enjoyment factor for the last year of 96%, we've still killed more people than we've saved. And I think we can say with absolute certainty that the average enjoyment of people's lives over the last year compared to normal is not as high as 96%. I've never understood why this very obvious cost-benefit analysis alone didn't just have us dismiss lockdown right at the start. When COVID struck, many extra people years were sadly going to be lost. But we had a choice as to which ones, and it seems to me that we've catastrophically gone with the option that kills more people years overall, even before you consider the other costs. Life is for living, not safeguarding in order that we may live it later. For millions of people, the last year hasn't been life, it's been existence. We've been keeping ourselves breathing in order that we may live the rest of our lives when this is over. We've been treating the problem very much as once we save all these lives, we can get back to being immortal. Well, I'm sorry to repeat the bad news, but you're not immortal, and you're now 1 year closer to death. That year is gone, and you are never getting it back. What did we do?
So that was a year ago. At the end of that video, I asked what will we do next? Well, the answer, sadly, was that we would continue with the madness and all lose another year. Soon it will be the 23rd of March 2022, at which point I will have 56 years left, according to my now increasingly unlikely prediction that I will live until I'm 100. Let's again remind ourselves what it means to kill. To kill is to forcibly remove years from a person's life. Again, if we assume that all lives are equally important, and any individual's future years are equally important, it doesn't matter which years you remove, it's still killing. Again, it's not as simple as that. We need to ask, how have the last 2 years been for you? My enjoyment factor has dropped from 50% to pretty much zero, and I can't imagine it's gone in the other direction for too many people. Don't get me wrong, if my losing 2 years of my life in this way had meant that many others have been spared many more years, I'd be happy enough. Indeed, I'd derive utility from knowing that I'd helped others, and my enjoyment factor would not have disintegrated to basically zero. But it hasn't meant this at all, has it? Every single correlational study produced seems to show that lockdowns had little or zero impact on outcome in terms of COVID deaths. Just recently, yet another study, this time from Johns Hopkins University, concluded lockdowns have had little to no public health effects. They have imposed enormous economic and social costs. Lockdown policies are ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument. The best argument for this never-tried-before policy, an alternative hypothesis that has hijacked the null hypothesis and sits in its place, still seems to be to point at a graph of deaths curling over and saying, look. This argument could be made for any arbitrary measure taken roughly 3 weeks before deaths curling over in any seasonal pattern of death counts in history. This isn't science. This is simply the most tragic example of the cum hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy in all of our history. Since event Y followed event X, event Y must have been caused by event X. Even if there was some decent evidence that these brand new policies had a significant benefit, still, where is the weighing up of this benefit against the cost? We needed a proper cost-benefit analysis based on quality-adjusted life years, and still no government in any country has even mentioned this as a possibility, let alone produced one. All the ones that have been independently produced conclude that these policies fail a cost-benefit analysis by an astonishing margin. It's beyond obvious, even just looking at my simple life years argument repeated in this video, that we must never again enact these catastrophic policies. Let's get back to normal, let's keep it normal, and enjoy all the future years that each of us has. Please make sure you are ready to stand up and say no the next time any government tries to enforce this disastrous policy on us.